In the heart of summer, a group of adventurous friends decided to escape the mundane life of their small town and set their sights on the endless blue horizons of the sea. This youthful ensemble, filled with excitement and a thirst for adventure, consisted of Jason, a natural leader with a knack for planning; Sarah, the free-spirited artist; Mark, the tech-savvy jokester; Emily, the quiet one with a deep love for nature; and Zoe, the outgoing and fearless. Over the months leading up to their vacation, they scrimped and saved, pouring every dime into a collective fund for what they envisioned as the perfect summer getaway. They hunted for deals, booked a quaint beachside lodging, and meticulously planned each day to ensure a memorable experience. The much-anticipated day finally arrived. After a long drive filled with laughter, music, and incessant chatter about the fun awaiting them, they reached their destination. The coastal town was vibrant, alive with the sounds of waves crashing and distant chatter from other beachgoers. They quickly checked into their accommodation, a cozy little place just a few minutes' walk from the beach, and wasted no time in heading out to explore. As evening approached, the group found themselves drawn to the lively atmosphere of the beach, where locals and tourists alike gathered around bonfires. Inspired by the setting sun and the eerie dance of flames against the darkening sky, they joined a larger group, making new friends as the night unfolded. The ambiance was perfect for sharing stories, and what better tales to share by the fire than those of horror and mystery? One by one, each person spun their own chilling tales, stories of haunted ships and ghostly apparitions, of unexplained disappearances and cursed treasures. The group, enraptured and occasionally glancing over their shoulders, didn't notice the time passing as the moon climbed higher in the night sky. As the stories wound down and the fire dwindled to glowing embers, they decided to call it a night, unaware of the true adventure that awaited them the next day. Morning came with a bright and inviting sun. Energized and eager, they headed to the beach, diving into the refreshing waters to swim. Laughter and splashing echoed around them as they enjoyed the simple pleasure of the sea. After a while, Mark, always one for a bit of mischief, pointed out a small boat bobbing near the shore, seemingly forgotten. With a mischievous grin, he suggested they take it out for a spin. "It's just sitting there. It's like it's begging for adventure," he exclaimed, managing to convince the rest with his infectious enthusiasm. They paddled out, laughing and joking, the shore growing distant as they aimed for the open waters. However, as they ventured further, they strayed into a restricted zone, marked by faded signs that they either didn't see or chose to ignore in their excitement. The sea, initially calm, began to show a different face. Strong currents caught the small boat, pulling it with an alarming force between two large rocks protruding ominously from the water. The impact was sudden. The boat shook violently, water splashing over the sides, and in the chaos, a loud crack signified the hull splitting. Water began to flood in rapidly, panic setting in as they scrambled to bail the water out with their hands. It was then, in the midst of their frantic efforts, that they saw it, a massive shadow under the water, growing larger and heading straight toward them. The shadow turned out to be a gigantic shark, its eyes dead and unfeeling as it collided with the boat, tearing it into two. Screams filled the air as the shark attacked, picking them off one by one. The horror was unimaginable, each moment a living nightmare as they watched helplessly. Through sheer luck and desperation, Zoe and her boyfriend managed to cling to one of the large rocks, their screams for help piercing the roar of the ocean. Rescue arrived much later, but for most, it was too late. Only Zoe and her boyfriend survived the harrowing ordeal, the trauma of the event etching itself deep into their minds, a constant reminder of the fateful day the sea turned against them. In the weeks following the harrowing incident, Zoe and her boyfriend Liam returned to their small town, their minds burdened with the unbearable weight of survival. The vibrant spirits they once carried were now shadows, dimmed by the screams and the salt water that still seemed to cling to their skin. As the local media caught wind of the tragedy, their story was splashed across every front page and news segment, casting them unwittingly as the resilient survivors of a maritime horror. But each interview, each retelling, only served to deepen their trauma, replaying the terror in a ceaseless loop. In an effort to escape the prying eyes and the suffocating pity of their townsfolk, Zoe and Liam decided to seclude themselves in Liam's old family cabin, nestled deep in the woods surrounding the town. It was a rustic place, far from the sea, where the only sounds were the whispering winds and the occasional distant howl of a forest creature. Here they hoped to find some semblance of peace, to somehow stitch their lives back together. But peace proved elusive. On their first night at the cabin, as the sun dipped below the tree line and darkness embraced the woods, strange occurrences began to unfold. It started with small, almost dismissible sounds, the soft creak of floorboards, the gentle rustling of leaves, and a faint dripping sound that seemed to have no source. As the night deepened, these sounds grew into a cacophony of whispers that echoed through the cabin. Zoe, lying awake next to Liam, felt the chill of fear creeping up her spine. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely breaking the silence. Liam listened, his eyes widening as he discerned the distant, indistinct chatter. It was as if the night itself was speaking to them, murmuring in a tongue twisted by wind and shadow. They decided to investigate, thinking perhaps an animal had made its way inside the cabin. Armed with a flashlight, they moved cautiously through the darkened hallways, their hearts pounding in their chests. But they found nothing. No sign of intrusion, no broken windows, no open doors. Returning to their room, the couple tried to dismiss the sounds, attributing them to the old cabin settling into the night. But as they settled back into bed, the true horror began. From beneath them, from the very foundation of the cabin, there erupted a sound so terrifying, so unnatural, that it froze them in their beds. It was a loud, guttural roar, not of any beast of the earth, but reminiscent of the raging sea and the monstrous entities that lurked beneath its waves. The roar was accompanied by a palpable sense of pressure, as if the cabin itself was being submerged into the depths of an ocean. Panicked, Zoe and Liam rushed to the windows, only to see the forest outside bathed in an eerie blue light pulsing like the heart of the sea. The trees swayed as if underwater, their movements slow and graceful and utterly alien. The air grew cold and damp, and the scent of salt water filled their lungs. Suddenly the room darkened as the light flickered and died, plunging them into pitch blackness. The roar grew louder, more desperate, and was joined by other more horrifying sounds. Screams of agony and terror, echoing through what seemed like the hollow chambers of a colossal cavern. It was as if the sea had followed them, bringing with it all the horror of that fateful day. Zoe and Liam clung to each other, whispering prayers they no longer believed would be answered. As the night stretched on, the sounds did not cease but grew in intensity and despair, a symphony of the damned that neither of them could escape. As dawn finally broke, the sounds gradually faded, leaving behind an oppressive silence. The cabin was untouched, the forest calm and serene as if the night's horrors were but a shared nightmare. But both knew better. The sea had marked them, its depths calling out with a sinister, inescapable whisper. The dawn light did little to ease the terror that had gripped Zoe and Liam. The cabin, once a sanctuary of solitude and peace, now felt like a cage, trapping them with unseen horrors that lurked just beyond their senses. The memory of the night's otherworldly events haunted them, clinging closer than their own shadows. In the harsh light of day, they attempted to rationalize the terrors. Perhaps it was the trauma resurfacing, their minds playing cruel tricks. But deep down, they knew the horror was real, as tangible as the scars left on their bodies by the sea. Determined to escape the cabin's oppressive atmosphere, they ventured into the surrounding woods, hoping that the natural calm of the forest might restore some semblance of peace to their frayed nerves. However, as they walked deeper into the woods, a subtle change began to permeate the air around them. A faint mist, unusual for this time of year, started to rise from the ground, swirling around their feet like a living thing. With each step, the mist thickened, growing denser and eerily reminiscent of the sea fog they remembered all too well from their doomed boat trip. The light filtering through the trees took on a strange, murky quality, and the silence of the forest grew oppressive. Suddenly, a soft, sibilant voice whispered through the trees, the words indistinct but unmistakably calling to them. "Return," it seemed to say, a single word echoed over and over, carried on the breeze that had now picked up, chilling and salty as if blown in from the ocean itself. The couple stopped, clutching each other, their eyes wide with fright. The voice was not alone. Others joined it, a chorus of whispers that seemed both foreign and painfully familiar, echoes of their deceased friends, mixed with the groans and cries of the sea. Zoe, her face pale with terror, pulled Liam back toward the cabin. "We need to leave," she gasped, her voice trembling. "It's here, whatever it is. It's followed us." But as they turned to flee, the ground beneath them shifted unexpectedly. The forest floor seemed to undulate, waves of earth rippling like the surface of the sea during a storm. Trees bent and twisted, their branches swaying with unnatural agility, as if underwater currents were pulling at them. Overcome with panic, Liam and Zoe ran, but the forest seemed to warp around them, paths twisting and turning in impossible ways. The mist closed in, now thick and impenetrable, reducing their world to a few feet in every direction. And all the while the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Then from the mist figures began to emerge, shadowy, indistinct shapes that moved with the grace of sea creatures. They circled the couple, their forms occasionally breaking through the fog, revealing glimpses of horrific, twisted visages, faces of their friends, distorted by water and death. Zoe screamed, a sound of utter despair and fear, as one of the figures reached for her, its touch cold and damp like the ocean's depths. Liam tried to pull her away, but the figure held fast, its grip unnaturally strong. In a desperate bid for freedom, Liam managed to tear Zoe from the figure's grasp, and they stumbled forward, breaking through the last of the mist into a clearing. The sudden escape from the fog felt like surfacing from a deep dive, gasping for air and life. Breathing heavily, they looked back at the mist-shrouded forest, the whispers now fading into a sorrowful wail that echoed with the loneliness of the ocean. The figures did not pursue them out of the mist, but the threat lingered, as palpable as the damp chill that clung to their clothes. Zoe and Liam knew then that they could not run from this curse. The sea had marked them, its depths calling them back to settle the score with a force as relentless and unforgiving as the tides. Zoe and Liam, with the terror of the forest still fresh in their minds, decided they could no longer stay at the cabin. It was clear that whatever malevolent force was haunting them, it was not confined to the sea or any single place. They needed help. Someone who could understand and perhaps even break the curse that seemed to have bound itself to them since that fateful day at sea. They returned to town, their appearance ragged and their eyes haunted. The town itself seemed different now, as if their ordeal had shifted the way they perceived everything around them. People they passed gave them curious glances, their whispers like ripples spreading across calm water. Desperate for any form of assistance, they sought out Mrs. Alder, an elderly woman known in hushed tones around town for her knowledge of the occult and old sea lore. Her home was on the outskirts of town, a crooked house filled with wind chimes and shelves heavy with strange artifacts and old books. Mrs. Alder listened intently as Zoe and Liam recounted their experiences, her eyes sharp and assessing. When they finished, she was silent for a long moment, her fingers tapping on the wooden arm of her chair. "You've been touched by the deep," she finally said, her voice grave. "The sea does not forget, and it does not forgive. What you encountered was no ordinary beast but a spirit of the ocean, awakened and angered." She explained that there are places in the sea that are sacred and cursed, hidden from the eyes of the uninitiated. By venturing into forbidden waters and disrupting its peace, they had incurred the wrath of something ancient and powerful, something that would not rest until it had claimed them. "The sea calls to what it owns, and it will use whatever means to bring you back to its depths," Mrs. Alder continued. "You can try to run, but the water is everywhere. It's in the air you breathe, the clouds above, the rain that falls. It will find you." Her words were like a cold current, sending shivers down their spines. Mrs. Alder offered them a small glimmer of hope, however. "There is a possibility to appease the spirit," she said, pulling a dusty tome from a shelf behind her. "An offering, a ritual of sorts, but it comes with great risk." She explained that they would need to return to the sea, to the exact spot where the tragedy occurred, and perform a ritual of appeasement during the next full moon. The ritual would require them to offer something precious, a token of respect and apology to the spirits of the deep. Armed with a sense of desperate hope, Zoe and Liam agreed to the plan. They spent the next days gathering what was needed for the ritual, each item carefully chosen to symbolize life, loss, and apology. They collected seashells from the shore, a locket containing photos of their friends, and tears shed during their time of mourning, each a piece of their soul, offered in hope of peace. As the night of the full moon approached, they made their way back to the coast. The beach was eerily silent under the moonlight, the waves whispering against the shore as if aware of the coming ritual. With trembling hands, they set up a small altar on the sand, arranging the shells, the locket, and a bowl of salt water. As they began the ritual, the air grew thick and heavy, the sea roiling as if agitated. They recited the words Mrs. Alder had given them, their voices steady despite the fear that clenched their hearts. Suddenly, a deep, mournful cry echoed from the depths, the water in front of them swirling and frothing. The sea seemed to rise, a massive wave forming and looming over them, its crest glinting in the moonlight like the scales of some great leviathan. They braced themselves, unsure if the ritual would appease the spirit or provoke it further. The wave crashed down, enveloping them in cold, dark water, the roar of the sea filling their ears. But as quickly as it came, the wave receded, pulling back into the calm, almost gentle sea. The night returned to silence, the tension breaking like a snapped line. Zoe and Liam, soaked but unharmed, stared out at the water, waiting for a sign. Minutes passed, and slowly, the normal sounds of the night returned. The ocean had calmed. Its surface was as smooth as glass under the moonlight, reflecting the stars above. They fell to their knees on the sand, relief and exhaustion overwhelming them. It seemed the offering had been accepted, the spirit appeased. As they looked at each other, a sense of cautious peace settled between them. Maybe, just maybe, they had found a way to live with the curse, to keep the darkness at bay. As they left the beach, a faint whisper followed them, a reminder that the sea would always be watching, waiting. But for now, it was still. In the months following the ritual, Zoe and Liam's lives slowly began to regain some semblance of normalcy. The relentless haunting seemed to have ceased, and the ocean, once a source of unspeakable terror, now murmured quietly in the background of their existence. They dared to hope that the nightmare was truly over, that they had appeased the restless spirit of the deep. However, the shadow of the past is never fully banished, lurking just beneath the surface of their newfound peace. As autumn descended, bringing with it the chill of coming winter and the memory of cold, dark waters, the couple found their nights increasingly disturbed by vivid dreams. Zoe was the first to notice the change. She awoke one night, gasping for air, her body drenched in sweat, as though she had just been pulled from icy depths. In her dream, she had been back on the boat, the ocean churning around her, a great shadow looming beneath the waves. The dream felt disturbingly real. The cold touch of the water, the oppressive pressure of deep sea, the sharp scent of brine invading her senses. Liam tried to comfort her, but as the nights progressed, he too began to experience the same harrowing dreams. They would wake, clutching at each other in the dark, their hearts pounding with a familiar dread. It was as though the sea, dissatisfied with the peace it had granted, was calling them back, reminding them of its presence. Their days became a haze of anxiety and fatigue as the dreams intensified.
each one more vivid than the last. They found themselves walking to the beach almost involuntarily, drawn by a force they could neither deny nor understand. Standing on the shore, they watched the waves roll in, feeling an inexplicable pull towards the water. It was during one of these somber visits that they met an old fisherman, his face weathered by years of sea winds. He eyed them with a knowing look, his gaze piercing. "The sea doesn't let go easily," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "If it's got a hold of you, it's for life. You can't just give it something and expect that to be the end. It always comes back for more." His words struck a chilling chord. Desperate for answers, they visited Mrs. Alder again, hoping she might offer another solution. The old woman received them with a solemn nod, her eyes reflecting a deep, unspoken sorrow. "You've opened a door that was meant to stay closed," she told them softly. "The ritual may have calmed the storm for a while, but the sea is a living thing. It breathes, it desires, it hungers. You are tied to it now, part of its vast, eternal cycle." She suggested another, more drastic measure, a binding ritual that might sever their connection to the sea permanently. But it was a dangerous endeavor, one that required them to confront the spirit directly, to face whatever lay beneath those waves in a physical and spiritual trial. With few options left and their sanity hanging by a thread, Zoe and Liam agreed. They began the preparations Mrs. Alder outlined, gathering rare herbs, sacred stones, and items of personal significance to anchor them to the land. The night of the binding ritual arrived, darker and stormier than any they had seen before. They returned to the same beach, where the land met the sea, the border between their world and the watery realm below. The wind howled like the cries of drowned sailors as they drew the sacred symbols in the sand, arranging the stones and herbs in a precise pattern. With the storm raging around them, they started the incantation, their voices steady against the crashing of the waves. Lightning flashed, illuminating the roiling sea, and for a moment they saw it, a vast silhouette beneath the water, its form massive and moving with purpose towards the shore. The water surged, rising up like a wall, and as it approached, they continued the chant, pouring every ounce of their will into the words. The sea crashed down upon them, the cold, salty water enveloping them, dragging them towards the depths. But they held on, clinging to the anchor items, reciting the incantation over and over. And then, as suddenly as it had surged, the water retreated, leaving them gasping on the wet sand, the storm dissipating as quickly as it had come. Exhausted but alive, they felt a change in the air, a lightness they had not felt since before their ordeal began. As they looked out at the calm sea, now just a gentle whisper against the shore, they hoped against hope that this time, the nightmare was truly over.
The aftermath of the binding ritual left Zoe and Liam profoundly altered. The constant, oppressive dread that had been their companion since that cursed day at sea seemed to have lifted, replaced by a tentative sense of relief. They walked back from the beach under a sky that was clearer than any they had seen in months, the stars twinkling as if in approval of their victory. However, the sea is an entity as ancient as time itself, its mysteries deep and its memory long. The couple soon realized that their struggle might have subdued the immediate threats, but the deeper connection forged between them and the ocean's abyssal spirits was not so easily broken. In the days that followed, their lives slowly returned to a routine, yet they remained vigilant, half expecting the haunting to resume at any moment. But as weeks turned into months without incident, their anxiety began to ebb. Perhaps they dared to believe they had truly freed themselves from the sea's grasp. This peace allowed them to rebuild parts of their lives that had been neglected. Zoe returned to her painting, her canvases no longer filled with the dark, tumultuous waves of previous months, but with vibrant landscapes bathed in sunlight. Liam found solace in writing, documenting their experiences in a memoir, a testament to their survival and a guide for those who might one day find themselves ensnared by similar spectral tides. Yet, the sea did not forget, nor did it forgive. It was during a visit to the beach on the anniversary of their ordeal that the final chapter of their story began to unfold.
The day was unusually calm, the ocean's surface glassy and undisturbed, reflecting the vast expanse of the sky. They walked along the shore, their eyes not on the horizon, but scanning the water, searching for signs of the uncanny. As they reached the spot where they had performed the binding ritual, a chill breeze swept across the beach, stirring the sand into swirling patterns around their feet. The air grew heavy, charged with a palpable tension. Then, without warning, the water at their feet receded, pulling back with alarming speed, revealing the wet, shimmering seabed. A deep, resonant sound filled the air, a groan of the earth below, as if something massive was stirring beneath the waves. Zoe and Liam exchanged a look of horror, realizing what was happening. They turned to run just as the sea roared back towards the shore, a towering wall of water racing towards them with relentless fury. But this time, they were not caught unprepared. Clutching each other's hands, they recited a chant that Mrs. Alder had taught them, a ward of protection, their voices firm against the thunderous onslaught. As the wave crashed down around them, a brilliant light burst from where they stood, forming a barrier that parted the water around them. The sea's fury was immense, but the light held, a shield against the dark depths. When the water finally settled and the wave receded, Zoe and Liam were left standing in a small circle of dry sand, the protective light fading but their lives intact. They looked out at the calming sea, a mutual understanding passing between them. This was not a victory, but an armistice, an acknowledgement of respect and boundaries between them and the deep. Walking back from the beach, hand in hand, they knew the sea would always be a part of their lives, a constant undercurrent. But they had learned to live with it, to respect its power and mystery. They had faced the depths and emerged not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and together. As they left the shore behind, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a soft, forgiving twilight. The sea whispered behind them, no longer a threat, but a reminder of the wild, untamable beauty of the natural world, and of the thin, delicate line humans walk within it.